Hi, you're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on KC Radio 97.7 FM. And this is David Bromberg. If you don't know who that is, don't worry about it. I have no idea who you are.
Terrific. You were a young lad during the early years of rock and roll, so no doubt you would have heard what a lot of teenagers were listening to at the time. What led you down the path to discovering the folk, blues, bluegrass music and the types of genres that you worked with over the years?
Well, I listened to everything. I listened to everything on the radio. I love the old rock and roll, especially old R&B stuff. And I even do some of that stuff. But I also, at summer camp, I got turned on to the Weavers and Pete Seeger and Bill Monroe and Earl Scruggs and all of this acoustic music as well. And when I started playing, I actually played electric guitar before I played acoustic guitar. And I think one of the reasons why I got a lot of studio work was that I adapted technique that a lot of people used on electric guitar onto the acoustic guitar, and at the time not many people were doing that. So I became known for what I could do on the acoustic guitar.
Now you frequented the Greenwich Village folk scene in the 60s. How great a learning experience was that for you at the time?
Oh, it was a wonderful learning experience. And around the same time, maybe starting a little bit before that even, I took lessons from Reverend Gary Davis. And on occasion, I would lead him to church or concerts or wherever he needed to go. And that was a great learning experience.
What type of character was the Reverend, and what did you specifically learn from him that you still take with you today?
Well, the Reverend was indeed a character. He had a sense of humor, and he'd mess with you. I remember him teaching me a tune of his, "I'll Be All Right," which is the tune that "We Shall Overcome" came out of. And at one point he played a chord I didn't recognize, and I asked him what it was, and he said, "That's an E9." I said, "What's an E9?" He said, "This is an E9." I said, "Okay," and I learned how to play it, and came back a week later and played the tune for him, and he stopped me right at that chord. He said, "What's that chord?" I said, "That's an E9." He said, "What's an E9?" I said, "This is an E9." He said, "That's the wrong chord. It's a B minor." and from then on, whenever he knew I was there, he'd play it with a B minor. But sometimes, if I wasn't there, he'd play it with an E9. You know, he was just messing with me. He was something.
You, as you mentioned earlier, became in great demand as a session player, playing on a wide array of records during that time. Were you harbouring ambitions at that time to become a recording artist in your own right?
No, actually, I wasn't. I was really into the whole idea of being an accompanist. I took it very seriously.
One of the standout sessions, or some of the standout sessions that you've been identified with, is you work with Bob Dylan. Did you have any preconceived notion of what he would be like to work with in the studio?
No, I never had any preconceived notions of what anybody would be like to work with in the studio. And with Bob, it was really right up my alley. With Bob, I think it's pretty much always sink or swim. He'll play a tune, and the first time you hear it may be the last take. You have to figure it out as you go along very frequently. I mean, sometimes he'll run something down, but for a lot of the tunes that we did, we just did them. And the training in Greenwich Village really helped me in that I could anticipate where a tune was going to go.
Now, I believe it was an appearance at the Isle of Wight festival that was instrumental in getting your career as a solo performer off the ground. Can you relate that story to us?
Okay. I was at the Isle of Wight on a Wednesday. The press did not arrive until Friday. However, there were well over 200,000 people there already, and perhaps a dozen of them paid the admission. They broke down the fences pretty early, and everybody came in free. And that's the way it was the whole weekend. There ended up being no charge. I was there to accompany a singer named Rosalie Sorrells, and the thing that is a little counterintuitive but true is that audiences that have paid nothing are the hardest to please.
Mm.
And this everybody who performs knows this. And this audience was tremendously hard to please, and they booed some very famous people off the stage. Rosalie and I followed Chris Christopherson, and he wasn't booed off the stage, but they gave him a really rough time. And he and his musicians, who Norman Blake was playing with him, he was an old friend of mine, they were a little shaken by the whole experience. And Rosalie and I went on stage, and she began to perform. Now, Rosalie's thing is really a very intimate thing and is best in a very small room. So the crowd started to get restless after a tune or couple of tunes. And she asked me if I would do, at that time I used to do a tune called the Bullfrog Blues, which was kind of long and funny.
Mm.
And she asked me if I would do that tune. That was the first and last time that she ever asked me to perform in her set. It wasn't like a usual thing, here's David's spot. She just decided to see what would happen. And the crowd really liked it. And they permitted her to finish her set without further disturbance. So when we got off stage, the promoters asked me if I would return at dusk. They may have specified the hour, or they may have just said dusk. I don't recall. At the time, I was very green, and I didn't realize that at an outdoor festival, the ideal time to perform is dusk.
Mm.
Because at this point, the only real light is coming from the stage, and at this point, your brain is not fried necessarily, as fried with too much music to be able to absorb things. So I came back and I asked them how many tunes they wanted me to do, and they said do an hour. And I don't think I'd ever in my life done an hour. But the crowd, I was the underdog, or they had pity on me or sympathy or something. And when I finished my hour, they gave me 2 or 3 encores, which astounded me. And had there been press there, that would have made a career for me. But there was no press there. It was only Wednesday night. And none of the big names were there yet. So none of the really big names. I mean, Chris Christopherson was a pretty big name at the time, and there were a couple of other pretty big names who were maltreated. But they treated me great. I mean, I was the unexpected thing. So I was their favorite or something for the hour that I was on stage.
Mm.
And Tio Macero was recording the whole thing for Columbia Records, and he recommended that they sign me. Now, why they did it when they listened to the tapes is beyond me, because the agreement that Columbia had made with the promoters of the festival was that there would be an electrical current regulator so that the machines would run at the proper speed. There was no such thing. So the machines recorded everything slow.
Ah.
And when the tapes were mastered and played back in New York City, I sounded like a chipmunk. But they put it on the record.
Now, your albums in the 70s were such an eclectic group of recordings, so much different musical territories were covered. Did you get restless staying in one musical field for too long?
Um, I never thought of it that way, actually. I just like a lot of different kinds of stuff, and I saw no reason not to do it. Um, you know, my favorite records were always anthologies
Mm.
because every track would have a different quality and attract my attention all over again. And so my records were kind of like that. The opposite of that is if you listen to any collection of singles, including, it could be the most modern collection of singles or, hits by one artist, or back as far as Bessie Smith. After the first one or two, your eyes glaze over. And the reason is that it's always been that if you have a hit, the record company wants your next release to sound almost exactly like the one that was a hit. And if you listen to the Bessie Smith things, you hear that. It's very hard to pick out the gems because, as I say, your eyes glaze over it. And the same is true for any collection of hits by any artist, or a collection of singles, I should say, not necessarily hits, singles by any artist, because the single following the last single sounds like the one before it.
We'll take you back to a tour you did down here in Australia back in 1980, just before you took yourself off the road for a while. I have vivid memories of that.
22 years.
Yeah, I saw you twice during that tour. The first show was a highly energetic show, and the second one, a couple of weeks later, had a very low-key, almost melancholy feel to it. And I've read later where you described yourself as going through some burnout at the time. Was that mood creeping into your shows?
To tell you the truth, I can't recall that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall that it did. The one show that is clearest in my mind, and there's only a part of it, we did a show towards the end of the tour where we finished with some fiddle tunes, and we played, three of us were playing the fiddle, and we played up the aisle of the auditorium
and into the street.
Out into the street, and
Yes.
The audience followed us.
I remember it well.
Oh, were you there?
I was there, yes.
Wasn't that one of the last ones in Melbourne or something?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I remember. I also remember, there was a great deal I didn't understand about Australia and the Australian culture, and it took a while. I probably put my foot in my mouth a dozen times. But I learned.
If you could go back to 1980 and talk to the David Bromberg at the time, just about to take that long break from touring, what advice would you give him?
Stay away from the Australian cliches, from the United States. They don't play well. And have fun, and don't. I remember being at a television station and performing, and they showed a video in 1980. A video.
Mm.
That's pretty early. And my reaction to it was, well, in the States we have live performances. We don't need to do this. What an idiot.
Were there any warning signs around that time that that burnout was starting to creep in?
There were from time to time, but I don't recall any in Australia. Australia, everything was new and different, sometimes difficult, sometimes wonderful.
Mm. So what triggered the initial interest in violin making?
Well, I was living in Marin County when I started to get burned out. And you have to understand that at that point I'd been on the road for 2 years without being home for 2 weeks. and that's going to burn pretty near anybody
Oh,
out.
for sure. Yeah.
And I was too stupid to recognize it. There's a lot of what I'm saying that reflect upon my stupidity at the time. And I was too dumb to realize that this was burnout. I didn't think I could ever burn out. So the conclusion that I reached was that I was no longer a musician. And the only intellectual stimulation I got in Marin County at the time, aside from playing music, which was not the easiest thing in Marin, because you have to drive for half an hour, 45 minutes to get together with anybody to play any music. But there was a violin shop nearby, and I found it intriguing that a violin maker could look over an instrument and, without referring to the label, which are very frequently misleading, tell you where and when a violin was made, and sometimes by whom. And I wanted to learn to do that. So I went to violin making school to begin my studies, and that was the very beginning.
Did you find yourself having a whole new perspective on the instrument?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I looked at it very, very differently. I learned to look at it very differently. I learned to really admire it and understand what was beautiful and what was odd and what was unique and I did start to look at it very differently.
Yeah. So tell us about your shop there in Wilmington.
Well, we have a full service. It's like a big city shop in a small city. Wilmington's not a big city, but it is a city. And the Delaware Symphony plays here. And we have very fine instruments. And, we have instruments ranging from below $1,000, not a whole lot below, but below $1,000 up into the six figures. And we have a huge inventory. And I spend my time trying to identify and study and memorize instruments. The repair part and the making are done by people who rent space from me, and that's their own business. I buy and sell because I have a pretty good idea of what's what.
Mm.
But most of my time is spent studying. This is one of these things, it's like music. There's no bottom to it. There's no end to it. No one will ever know it all, and I'm a long way from knowing it all.
So you're learning every day still?
Learning every day.
Yeah. So during that 22 years off the road and focusing on the violin, did you put the guitar away completely during that time?
Pretty much. I would play on rare occasions. It was kind of like, I don't know if you've ever been to a picnic. I mean, in the United States, at a picnic, somebody might turn up with a baseball and a bat and a glove, and you might all play baseball for the afternoon. Mm. And then you wouldn't think about it till the next time you were at a picnic where somebody had a bat and a ball and a glove. It was kind of like that with me and playing.
So looking back during the years of the 70s to late 70s, do you think maybe it would have been better if you'd focused on a quality of live performance rather than a quantity? Do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm certain it would have. Truthfully, I can only remember 2 nights in a very, very long career when I didn't want to be there, where I was just too burnt out to perform. Mm-hmm. But the realization that something was amiss came when I was off the road, because I discovered that I wasn't writing, I wasn't practicing, I wasn't jamming. What is there of a musician there?
What was the catalyst that inspired you to get back into recording and performing again?
Well, I was living in Chicago, which was great for studying violin. Chicago is a center of violin making and appraising in the United States. In my opinion, the two best experts in the United States were both in Chicago. So, and that's where the violin making school that I graduated from was located. So I was very comfortable there for 22 years, with the exception of the winters, which are pretty bitter. And my wife couldn't take another winter there, and I don't blame her. It was a little rough on both of us. So we decided we had to move someplace where it wasn't going to be so bitter. And we're both from the East Coast. We're both actually New Yorkers, but we couldn't afford to go back to Manhattan. So we looked for a place where it might be a little bit warmer, but we're not Southerners, so we didn't go into the South. We picked Delaware. It's right on the eastern seaboard. The town of Wilmington is just barely south of Philadelphia.
Uh-huh.
When I was looking around, for some reason, the mayor decided, well, it probably wasn't just him, but people within the city government decided they wanted me to live there, live here. And I had lunch with the mayor a few times, and he told me that the street that I eventually live on, and my shop is on, used to have live music all up and down it at one time, and that's all gone. And he said he'd love it if it could happen again. And I figured the only way that I might be able to help with that is I could start a couple of jam sessions. So I started a kind of a bluegrass jam session and a Chicago blues electric guitar, Chicago blues jam session. And I figured that I would start those and be with them for a month and a half till I didn't like it anymore, and then they'd live or die. But what happened was some really good musicians started showing up. Some of them traveled quite a distance to be at the jam sessions. Evidently, I still had a little name recognition or something, and I started to really enjoy playing again. So I decided to go back on the road, but this time I had control of it.
Yeah.
The thing I didn't realize is that at any point I could have taken control, but I didn't realize that. Now I know, and I just won't go on the road for 2 months. That's never going to happen, let alone 2 years.
So when you began touring again, did you find that you actually missed that environment, that lifestyle, a little more than you thought you might?
I don't know that I felt that I had missed it. No, I don't think so. But on the other hand, it felt quite comfortable.
Now,
are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, I heard a weird noise, so I thought it was something.
That's fine.
I felt quite comfortable doing it, but I never felt like, oh, gee, did I miss this? Because the truth is, the performances are great fun, and we all say that we don't get paid for playing music. We get paid for getting there. Yeah. Because that stuff sucks.
Yeah, all the peripheral stuff.
When they invent teleportation, it will be the greatest gig in the world.
Absolutely. Now, your first record back was called Try Me One More Time. Was there a concern in your mind that fans may have disappeared, or even worse, you may have been forgotten by many?
It wouldn't have made any difference to me. I've always done this more for myself than for anyone else, and how much I'm appreciated is very pleasing. But it's not a matter of if I can't play for larger audiences, I just don't want to. It's not like that.
Yeah.
I used to, before I stopped playing, I used to envision myself when I got to be in my 50s playing in some local bar just doing jazz standards for anybody who'd walk in. You know, all I want to do is be able to play music. I can put it to you in a nutshell. At one point, when I was playing around the village, I started getting paid enough so that I could come home at night in a taxi. At that point, it was enough.
Yeah.
And it's still enough. That's good enough for me. If I can play music and come home in a taxi and, you know, not go hungry, and I mean, that's all that I really require. It sounds stupid, but it's all that I really require.
It's all you need, yeah.
Well, these days I require more. I require my family. But,
yeah. Now, I believe your live shows are pretty much off the cuff. You don't play to a prepared set list. How important is that spontaneity in your shows to you personally?
Well, it's what works for me. It produces. I'm really good at it, and I produce good shows that way, night after night.
Yeah.
So I see no reason to change it. I think I learned that from Jerry Jeff Walker. I used to be his band, and he never planned his sets that I can recall.
Now, I believe there was some talk about you being down here again for our upcoming festival season. Do you know if there's any closer to that actually happening?
I think there's a possibility of it happening. I don't think we've gotten confirmation. I would walk over broken glass, though, to do it. I'll tell you, the Byron Bay Blues Festival is the best run festival that I've ever been to. It's fantastic, and and the musicians who came with me, we all loved it and would really love to be back again. And this is not something we say about every festival we do, believe me.
Yeah.
It's unique to Byron Bay. It's really, really well done.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I hope that confirmation comes through. We'd love to see you down here again.
Well, the fact that you're going to write something may help.
Oh, it's actually going on radio, this one?
Oh, the radio. That may help even more.
Hopefully, yeah.
Do you have the new CD, Only Slightly Mad?
No, I don't as yet.
Ah, you must have that. It's the best recording I've ever made. Can you give me all the details on where to send a copy?
Yep, no problem. I'll email Michelle and let her know.
Okay, yeah. Please email Michelle and give her the details, and we'll send you that, because it's far and away the best recording I've ever made. I mean, my wife has it on her iPhone.
Wow.
My wife produced Try Me One More Time. That's not on her iPhone.
But this one
one's
is
on her iPhone.
Oh, fantastic.
And she herself is a very fine musician.
Excellent. And aside from a possible visit to Australia, what else is on your books for 2014?
Well, we're looking to accomplish world domination.
That would be good.
Yeah, I think so. I think I could run things a lot better than anybody else. So we'll see if we can't get that. But aside from that, I'm just going to keep doing what I do. You know, it's the trombone player's joke. A trombone player wins the lottery, and his friend says, "Wow, what are you going to do with all that money?" I guess I'll just keep working till the money runs out. So that's my thought.
Terrific. Hey, David, thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure catching up with you. It's been fantastic having you back on the recording scene again in recent years.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you, and thanks for calling. And we'll send you. I have to ask you also. Do you have the record "Use Me"? The CD Use Me?
I do have that one, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was the one before. Nobody ever understood that. That's the one where I asked people to write a song for me and then produce me doing it. That's why it was called Use Me.
Yeah, fantastic concept, yeah.
Yeah, it worked. But this new one is the best. Anyhow, thank you so much for calling, and
Thanks
thank you
again,
for your
David.
interest.
And we'll keep our fingers crossed for that Australian visit. We're here waiting
All
for
right.
you.
I appreciate it.
All the best.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.